Hi, and welcome to Third Eye Thinkers. I'm your host, Megan Benanti.
And I am your host, Michelle Welch, and we are so glad that you're joining us today. We have a special guest with us, Angela Kaufman, and we are very excited to have her actually in the studio with us today. So I'm just going to dive right in, Angela, and I'm going to read your bio so that we can get started and find out all the interesting things about your book that you have that you've come out with and the things you're doing at Soultopia this weekend. So Angela Kaufman has been a lifelong seeker of spiritual connection. As a teen, she began to explore Wicca, Tarot, and metaphysics, as well as mythology, psychology, and art. Blending the mystical and the practical, it is Angela's mission to help others connect with the world of spirit for healing, growth, and understanding. Her current work as an intuitive relationship and empowerment coach is based on training as a clinical social worker, certified intuitive consultant, psychic medium, and her personal journey. She conducts small group workshops to lead other women on the path to empowerment using the Queen Up system. Angela has co-authored several books, including Wicca, What's the Real Deal? Breaking Through the Misconceptions, Sacred Object, Sacred Space, Everyday Tools for the Modern Day Witch, and the Esoteric Dream Book, Mastering the Magical Symbolism of the Subconscious Mind, with Patricia Gardner and Dana Winters. She also enjoys writing fiction and short stories and creating spiritually inspired art. And Angela invites you to join empowered speakers like yourself in the Royal Court Inner Queen community on Facebook, and we will give that again at the end of the show so you guys can know how to find that. But welcome.
Oh, it's a pleasure to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thank you for being here.
Yeah, glad you came and that it worked out.
Yeah.
Because we knew we were going to do a show. We just weren't sure if it was going to be live or not. So this was a treat.
Yeah, so let's just dive right in. Megan and I both have read your book. I didn't go through every page of the workshop because I'm going to take the workshop on Sunday, so I didn't go through every bit of that. But I did go through the whole, the outline of the book. And one of the things that you said at the beginning of your book is, and I'm actually going to read how Megan wrote it, if that's okay with you, Megan, because I like how you formed the question better than how I formed it. It said you mentioned the transformational story in your life. Would you explain how you created this process of healing with the queens? And we'll talk more about that. But what was the transformational process and things in your life? Yeah.
Sure. So I had been working with tarot and archetypes and, spiritual things from very early on. And, of course, we get these opportunities to practice the things we've been studying. So back in 2009, I was actually hit by a car as a pedestrian and wanted nothing more than to go back to my life, like that I had all planned, because my plan, right? We all have our plan. And I had gone to school to be a social worker. I was a couple years into my, owning my first home. I was in a relationship that I felt was very positive and, everything seemed to be going wonderful. And so what I found was that the reality of recovering from this accident, particularly because one of the injuries was a mild traumatic brain injury. So it's disruptive when you have broken bones. It's not fun. It's, very difficult to have all these different injuries. But what I didn't realize, and what most people don't realize, is when somebody has a traumatic brain injury, you can look fine moment to moment, but it is so pervasive. It changes everything about the way you operate. And it's not quite like having other types of disabilities where it's obvious to other people, oh, if you're, in a wheelchair, you're not going to be going up and down stairs. People will look at you and think you can do all the things you used to do, and you will think you can do all the things you used to do until you try to do them, and it just becomes a mess. So because that was so pervasive, it really challenged everything. I had to step out of the career that I worked so hard for. Prior to the accident, a lot of my identity was tied up around being very academic and hardworking and, being an avid reader and all of these different things. And recovering from a brain injury, I'm like, I need to take a nap. I don't think I took naps when I was 4, and suddenly I'm 30 and I need to take a nap. I had to do things to take care of myself that forced me to slow down. And the positive of that, though, was that through that process of being forced to slow down and be more judicious about how I spent my energy, having to do things like daily meditations, which is very healing for brain injuries, it actually helped me open up my intuition. So it brought me to this point of crisis of saying, you know, oh my goodness, what do I do now? Because everything that I thought I was preparing for in life has suddenly just gone up in the air and I don't know what comes next. But at the same time, I had to push pause and really slow down and really realign my energy. And that's what helped me to open up to looking at, for example, the queens from the tarot as not just these beautiful images on a piece of cardboard, but really understanding these are aspects of myself. These are representations of the elements. And so it kind of allowed me to put all of the spiritual concepts that I had been studying and working with, really put them to the test, really put them together and decide, okay, well, what am I going to do? And I think to myself, okay, well, I'm going to queen up or give up, and give up is not an option. So I chose the latter.
Yeah, wow. So, you know, you mentioned that reading became hard, and I know you mentioned that in the book. So were you literally at a point where you were actually studying symbols, like different symbols on the cards themselves? I know the queens, of course, but also just symbolism in general.
Oh, that's a really good question. I had actually gotten really deep into tarot before the accident, and so the interesting thing is with the brain injury, it's, for me, like it'll manifest in different ways for different people. And for me, it was a matter of retaining new information that was really challenging. So my work with the tarot, I didn't have to like learn it over again. In fact, one of the things that showed up when I got evaluated, there's different ways that we process information. And one of the ways that I was very strong in processing information was through recognizing symbols and patterns, which may have been because I was really like nurturing those pathways before the accident, so they were very strong. But in regard to working with the symbols, that was something that I had already spent a lot of time really getting into and really understanding the meanings of all the different levels of each card. And that's something I'm really big into, is that we can look at a tarot card and then go to the book and look up the instructions and read the definition. And if that's what works for someone, that's fine. But I'm really big into, you know, understanding the nature of symbols so you can transfer them across different systems. So I think I was already kind of geared that way. It was more a matter of like seeing letters on a page or letters on a computer screen, like after a while that gets a little dizzying. So interestingly, my information processing kind of shifted. So now I do much better with like audiobooks, for example, versus seeing something and then remembering it.
Wow. No, that's really great. And that was one of the things I had been thinking about, that because imagery can be so powerful. And it's great that you had that established. But I also just think, you know, people don't realize how much symbolism is in our daily lives and how that's transferring across. So it was probably still being tapped into, even if you weren't looking at the tarot, you know?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So.
Well, so when you started writing the book, it was published in 2018. But one of the things I wanted you to do for our listeners is just give a little tease. Because I really want you guys to come to the workshop on Sunday at Soultopia, and also come and get readings on Saturday with Angela from 1 to 5 on Saturday. But give us a little bit about what the book Queen Up is about.
Sure. So it begins with a little glimpse into my story, but it's really not about my story. It's about wherever people are coming from, because we all get to that crossroads, whether it's a car accident. And that's kind of what brought me to the point of wanting to bring this information out to the public, because the more I work with people, the more I was seeing that the details of our stories differ. But we all go through, you know, speaking of patterns and symbols, we all go through this pattern where everything seems great and then suddenly it's not. And then we're like, oh no, what do I do? There's no rule book. The old rules don't apply anymore. It's a mess. How do I queen up now? So working with the book or coming to the workshop and working with this system teaches you how to consciously align your energy with the energies of the 4 queens. And so we all have the energies of all 4 queens. I try to steer us away from the thinking like, you know, I am the Queen of Swords or I am the Queen of Cups. Yes, you are. And you're the other 2 as well. We have those energies. Yes. We can pull on them when we need it. And so somebody can be very maybe introverted and more reflective and more Queen of Cups energy, but under the right circumstances, they can bring out their warrior energy, which is the Queen of Swords. So the book teaches teaches you how to go through different steps involving journaling, rituals, meditation, different exercises. And you mentioned that you didn't go through each of the exercises, which is totally fine, because one of the things I wanted to do with the book is really make it a choose your own adventure. So you can use the book as an oracle that you work with, where you flip open to a certain page intuitively. You can do cover to cover, but you can also kind of see where you're drawn and where are you drawn to work on, certain activities or a certain queen or a certain process. So this whole process teaches people how to consciously connect with the energies that the four queens represent, so that you can bring about change and access your creative power, your attraction, love, healing power, your abundance power, your courageous power, all these different things we have within ourselves.
Oh, and the book is actually really beautiful. Can you tell us a little bit about the artwork of the four queens in this?
Oh, thank you. Yes, I'm very happy to. The artwork in Queen Up, including the cover and the images of the four queens, were created by a gentleman named Shaheen Miro, and I love sharing his name and his information because he's a fantastic artist. He is also an intuitive reader. He created an oracle recently called the Lunar Nomad Oracle, and I was just so pleased with the work that he did. So basically, I wrote up descriptions of what each of the archetypal queens represent in the system, and I, associate them with all different things you'll see in the book. They're associated with different colors, different cardinal directions, different elemental energies, everything from angels to crystals to, you name it, seasons, everything. And he took this series of lists and came up with beautiful artwork.
It is, it is absolutely gorgeous.
And I really loved that part of the book because if you're feeling in a particular mood or you want to connect with a particular queen, you can literally tailor your wardrobe around that queen, which was great. Really great.
So I love that flipping through, and I read pretty meticulously at the beginning, and I thought, oh, am I supposed to read the next part yet? I don't want to, I don't want to not follow the rules. But it seems as though there are a lot of practical applications to really get you to dig in. Which one worked best for you?
That's a tough one to answer. It's a really good question. And as I think about this, I think there were kind of key times that I needed certain things. So there is a lot of, I like to make things spiritual and open up people's minds, but I also like to make it practical. So it's like, okay, this is a great concept. What do I do with it? Because there's one thing that frustrates me. It's when there's this like really great spiritual concept, but I don't know how to bring it into my day-to-day life. So I tried to bridge that gap. And what I found, one of the methods that really stands out to me, and it could be just because I'm geared toward writing, I like some of the practices around writing letters to your future self, writing letters to your past self, even writing the outcome that hasn't happened yet. Those kinds of things and it could just be the way my energy is geared. But the whole idea of, as I was formulating what would later become this book, part of what I had in my mind is I was really in a low spot thinking to myself, if my life were a book, I would just want to throw it against the wall right now. Like, I don't want to keep reading this story. It's like, it stinks. I don't like it. And this like voice in my head was like, okay, well then maybe you need to like rewrite the next chapter and stop complaining about it. And that really stood with me as, okay, the idea that we have this power to start to rewrite the next chapter, rewrite the ending. We might not like the chapter we're stuck in now. We might not be able to change the chapter that we just finished. And there's some things that really are beyond our control, but there's a lot that we can take charge of and start to steer in a different direction when we're consciously aligned to do that.
That is awesome. I worked very much in the same way when I was going through my deal and using tarot cards to help myself out. One of the things when I was reading this, so this was published in 2018 and your accident was in 2009?
Yes.
So were you working with the queens specifically at that time? Like, was this book something that evolved over a long period, or did you come up with it kind of quickly, or within the last couple of years and then publish it really fast?
Oh, it evolved. Okay. It totally evolved. What I first started doing is I was doing tarot readings for people, And I started working with, and just on a technical tarot side note, folks who have done tarot work, you know that like the court cards can be a little difficult. They stress people out because it's like, is this a person? Is it a situation? Is it the person I'm reading for? What is it? Right. And I was more and more guided to work with the queens. It just so happens that most of my clients ended up being women. I didn't, ban men from coming for readings. But a lot of the people that were coming for readings, I was guided to look at the queens as parts of themselves. And as I was doing that, the wheels are turning for me, and I'm thinking, there's something to this, because the people I'm reading for, sometimes they'll identify with one queen, but they don't see in themselves what I can very clearly see. And when I say clearly see it, I don't just think it was the psychic part. Like there's things that we see in other people that they simply cannot see in themselves. And that got me thinking, well, what if, and at first it was going to be a party. Like what if there was a way to get women together and have these little like inner queen tarot parties? And that was fun, but like I wanted to take it a little further. And then it was just going to be a game. And then I was like, okay, well, maybe a little further. So it was drawn out probably for about 4 or 5 years before it became a book. And it went through different incarnations, right? I tried at one point to self-publish, and it was a much smaller version of that. And it just kind of had to, I think as I was growing and going further in my recovery and my process, the book was able to open up more and become more of a comprehensive guide.
Wow. No, thank you. That was great.
It's interesting that you mentioned about that women tend to come to you. Mm-hmm. One of the questions I had for you, as you know, because I asked you about this one, is can the Queen Up system be applied to men, and have you applied it to men?
Absolutely, absolutely. And yeah, I do think there's something necessary and beneficial going on right now in our collective energy that is calling out the power of women. So I do think, there are times when I'll do a class and we go deep into stuff, and I will say, okay, this is for women only, because there are times that women come together and need to go a little deeper, and won't always do that if men are present. But a lot of the workshops that I do are open to men and women. I have actually, guys will ask me that question all the time, and sometimes they're serious, sometimes they're being snarky. But I've gotten really great feedback from men who have read the book and really enjoyed it. So it can be utilized, even though the language is, queen and divine feminine. But we're talking about energy, and that's one of the points that comes up in the book, is that the energy is not really about your anatomy. It's about, we are women, but we have masculine energy. Men have feminine energy. So there is part of the book that is specifically speaking to the experience of women, where we take on these labels from childhood, and then we get to some point in our adulthood and the labels don't quite fit, or we recognize that, hey, I didn't maybe want to be labeled this way. Right. And it's useful, I think, for us to start getting outside of that box. But actually something I realized after I had already written the book and was getting a lot of feedback from male friends is that, as a woman, I'm not always consciously aware of the ways that men have been labeled and typecast and limited, because I always think, oh, you've got all the power, what are you complaining about? But that power comes with a cost. And so, for a man to look at this process and say, well, what are my 4 different energies? What if I wanted to be more of a, Queen of Cups, who's more emotional and maternal and family oriented, whereas men in our society are trained more to be like, if we were going to put the queen archetypes, I'd say the Queen of Swords or the Queen of Pentacles. But if a man wanted to be more in alignment with those more, nurturing emotional energies, society says, no, you can't do that. So it would definitely benefit men to use this process to get in touch with all 4 of their elemental energies.
Very cool. Yeah. I was wondering about that as well. So
yeah. Well, as far as the class and the workshop, does someone really need, it sounds to me like you don't need to know tarot to benefit from this class. Can you speak to that?
Yes, you're absolutely correct. You can have knowledge and experience and come to the class and benefit from it. But if you have, one of the things that I try to convey to people, because sometimes people will even read the title of the book and I'll hear them say, oh, that's not for me, I don't know anything about tarot. And I say to them, no, that's totally for you. That's great. Because the fact that you're brand new to it means that you can be more open. I have had times where people that have experience get a little stuck because they're so focused on the use for tarot that they're used to, which is this is a tool for divination. And you can use the Queen Up system as kind of a divinatory oracle, but the bigger point with this system, with the class, is that this is about forming an actual working relationship with the queens. And so if you're meeting them for the first time, that's totally fine. It will still work for you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's great. One of the things I found interesting, and you had mentioned it in the book, was the elemental correlations between the queens is different than what I had started with like Eden Gray. Mm-hmm. What was your basis from that, coming from Mother of Peace background?
That is such a that has followed me around, where people will say, "Oh, I get so messed up with that." So yes, it's not from that particular deck. So my introduction to tarot came through studying Wicca. So my connection with the elements came from like the earth-based spirituality, and it just always made sense to me that like swords feel like aggressive, fiery, you know, that kind of energy, where wands are more like, oh, you know, the airy
fairy.
Yeah, the airy fairy element. And that just always made sense to me. And for about 8 years, I worked as part of a coven, and those correspondences were also what we worked with. And when I try to use decks that describe air as, or rather wands as fire and swords as air, I just have to switch them in my mind. So in the book, I'm very, like, I belabor this point a lot. Whatever your correspondences are that you work with, keep that. Because if it's already etched in your subconscious, don't try to undo it. That's like trying to put your shoes on the other foot and walk around, you know? Like, do whatever you're used to doing, because it's mostly about developing your intuitive connection with the elemental energies. And when I do workshops where people do have tarot experience, there's times that I'll just change the names of the queens, and we'll just say air, fire, water, and earth instead of saying wands and swords. That was actually a suggestion of somebody at a workshop that was experienced tarot readers. Like partway through, somebody said, could we just call them the Queen of Air and the Queen of Fire? I'm like, sure, that works. Because I don't want people to get stuck on that and then kind of miss the bigger process and the bigger transformation. But it can become a sticky area if someone's used to the reverse correspondences.
Well, and just, I mean, I've been in tarot for so long, but I loved actually the idea that it was like, okay, there's no rules. And, you know, and that's actually, like, Mary Greer is always saying that I love to break rules. And so I love that you came from a different perspective on that. And it's not that it's a right or wrong, it's what connected for you. And that's beautiful. And as I read it, I was like, just, you know, I wanted to be open to it. And because I was like, oh, this makes me look at the tarot in a very different way. So I saw it as a learning tool for me.
Right.
And also just in my comprehension of understanding the queens, because to me, you never know enough. We can always learn more. So.
Right.
I see. So have you started another book from this book? I bet you have.
I have. I've got a few things, a few irons in the fire that aren't quite complete yet, and I'm hoping to be able to say a little more about that in the near future. But there's a couple of offshoots that are kind of in the works, one that's a little bit more in the works than the others.
It seems like even some of the things we've talked about, I don't know if that's the direction you're going, but there just seems like there could be so many offshoots from this.
That is my hope, and I've started to expand even the focus of some of the workshops. So looking into things like Queen Up specifically for magic practitioners and Queen Up for relationships, and so there's a couple different directions that, you know, once we start working with the queens, just generally understanding their energy, how do we take it further? So
Wow.
Yeah, because I was thinking earlier how great it would be, you know, the Queen Up for relationships. So even if a man is even taking it to understand more about his partner, his friend, his wife, whatever it is, you know, his daughter even, I think that, just that in itself would be very beneficial. There's just so many directions you could go from this. Yeah.
Well, and I would love to see the King Down book too. Or King Up, King Down. I wasn't sure what would be good.
King Down.
Well, get down. That's where I was taking it.
Let's see, where would we go from there? What about the knights?
Right. Yeah. I mean, there's so many
Knights.
different ways to look at what you could do, where you can go with this. But I'm excited. I mean, I think anybody that is looking to grow with any, you know, we're all at different points in our life. And I love that you approached a different system and you've taken it in a way that's really user friendly for people that might not be into the tarot or necessarily into esoteric stuff and not sure what to do with that. And it's just a different way for them to identify with transformation in their life, because I think that's always what we're working on. It's the journey, it's not the destination. This is a great tool for that. Where, if people want to purchase the book, where would they go for that?
Well, you can go to Soultopia this weekend. This weekend. But it's available anywhere books are sold. It's also on the online retailers. Although if you have a favorite independent bookstore in your area and you want to support that independent bookstore, it is available wherever books are sold. However, if someone has a favorite local store that does not currently have it and you want to reach out to me, and I can reach out to that store to try to encourage them. But also people can visit my website, intuitiveangela.com.
Cool. Okay.
And as far as the workshop, it's part of the class.
Yes.
So it's when you pay for the workshop, which is, I believe, $50. I'm saying that correctly, right? Angela,
Yeah.
yes, I am. It's $50, and so I believe the book is part of that. And so just come into Soultopia. Definitely call if you're going to sign up for, definitely for the readings, because those I feel like are going to fill up very quickly, and also the workshop. I don't know how many we're taking, but we were talking earlier that you really are probably going to want to pre-register online if at all possible for that. I think that the interesting thing is we were talking before we started the podcast that Heather Ash Amara, am I saying her last name right? I feel like I always say it wrong.
I believe so. That's how I would say.
That's how I say it. Okay, well, Heather Ash, she came to Soultopia and she wrote the foreword in Queen Up, and it was a lovely foreword for you that she wrote, and your energy reminds me of each other a little bit. You're a little more gregarious, at least on here you are, but she very much had quite the following for her book, especially Warrior Goddess, and even her second one that she came out with. I think she has quite the following, and I have a feeling that's going to happen with you. Has that already started? You getting kind of people that are in this Queen Up group? I mean, this Facebook group, or has that already started with you?
It's growing. I would hope that someday I'd be able to have the following that Heather Ash has, but she's a wonderful person. Her energy is it's like calming and
well, you both have wonderful energy, and when we met at INATS in, I don't know, June or July of last year, and you had long hair.
Yes.
we didn't recognize you today. I love your hair, but you did a reading for me. It was brief, and of course, when you're there, I was kind of like all over the place. So I look forward to having a reading with you. If there's spots available, I let other people go first. But if there's spots, I'll definitely be getting one. But you had that calming energy too, and you guys did kind of remind me of each other. And it was interesting when I saw this, and I had received the book last summer, and I'd started reading it, and I thought, I really want to do this as a workshop and not kind of ruin the experience beforehand. But I thought of you as having these, I don't mean groupies, but you know what I mean. A lot of people, but she kind of does. Heather Ash kind of does.
Yeah.
But, a lot of people looking up to you to Queen Up. I really love it. And I love the full name, Queen Up, Reclaim Your Crown When Life Knocks You Down. We need to do that a lot. What is your suggestion? We just have a few minutes for someone who has been through a trauma where they feel like they really don't know if they can get back up, okay, or how to get back, and everything they thought their life was going to be, like you said, has been pulled from them. Besides going through this workshop, what else would you just say in a nutshell for them?
One of the things that stands out that I remember as being so difficult is I felt like I had to have everything figured out like right away, like something to replace the old life with right away, right now. So if there was one like simple thing, you have time. And it's going to unfold. And trust me when I say, even as a psychic, I didn't know what everything was going to look like. So you don't have to know what everything is going to look like either. You don't have to know what everything is. I still don't know what everything is going to look like. But you have time. And, the sun's going to keep coming up and down no matter what. So let yourself take whatever time you need to go through what you need to go through.
Yeah,
that's good advice.
Yeah, and
Right.
beautifully said. So,
right.
because we do tend to hurry, and
and want all the answers and want it to be fixed immediately.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And then sometimes we get ourselves in a situation where we're having to redo because we haven't taken that time. So that's lovely. Yeah. Well, so you guys sign up for the class and call Soultopia, or you can just go online to soultopia.guru and just pay straight from there, or from Facebook. You can click on the link to come to actually schedule a reading. You're going to need to call, but to sign up for the workshop, you can go straight onto the website and sign up. So we look forward to seeing everybody listening there this week. It's this weekend.
Yep.
Yeah.
And do you want to share any contact information for us, Angela, in case listeners want to reach out to you?
Oh, sure. So my website is intuitiveangela.com, and the email address is intuitiveangela@gmail.com. I also am around on Facebook and Instagram, and I believe the tag, or whatever you call that thing, it's Angela Kaufman and then the number 6.
Oh, perfect. Okay, great.
Yeah.
Well, thanks so much for joining us today.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So you all have been listening to Third Eye Thinkers, and today we've had Angela Kaufman as our guest. Please remember to subscribe, and if you enjoyed the show, give us a 5-star review, and keep Third Eye thinking. We'll see you soon.